today I'll talk about a scenario which is very common in the cloud environment, specific to cloud security. It can be any cloud, but we have Microsoft and it's part of the discussion and for a reason, because most of the organization use Microsoft 365 for email. They use Microsoft Team, SharePoint for document collaboration. So that's why it makes the perfect sense to look into that. So here is the document I come across and wanted to walk you through about Microsoft Information Protection. I will cover the high level topics here because it's a very huge presentation. So I'm not going to cover all the slide deck, but this will give you enough information when it comes to cloud security and also the cloud security versus the on-prem. And I've been very vocal and have been talking about all the times cloud security and traditional cybersecurity is different because as soon as you move your data to the cloud, things changes. So let's get into it without putting any time. And what do we find out based on this slide deck? So we'll see what is Microsoft Information Protection. There's also Azure Information Protection and what's the difference. We'll see what's there in this. And I will try my best to give you an idea about it. So as I said before, we go to any organization for email, they use Microsoft Exchange. In email, we send and receive attachment, and we have Word document and Excel sheets. So all data is there, and all the organization data is there. And if there is misconfiguration, chances are data will be leaked or they can lose the data. Even there is some intellectual property or the data which you wanted to share, but you wanted to protect that information. For example, you want to allow it to, let's say somebody wants to send an accounting file from accounting to another department or another bank, but at the same time, you want to make sure that does not have any confidential information or could be a mortgage document. You wanted to share something, does not have any social security and all that. So this is where this control helps. And this is where the cloud security we need to talk about. And this is where if this kind of data gets stolen, get lost, or whatever the case is, it can cost millions and millions of dollars to any organization. And this is where the framework comes in for Microsoft Information Protection. So this is the typical diagram, as I said before, on-premise environment, and then the user devices data. And in the past, the firewall, basically the security requirements. So imagine if you go to office, your data is hosted on the server behind a firewall. We used to have Exchange server, Microsoft Lync or Sky for Business server, Windows Firewall, or Windows File server, for example, for the file storage and everything. So in order to access the data, you had to basically be in the office or you had to do a VPN from your home. So basically every time you're taking action, you have to physically in the office or you just dial in through a VPN to make a virtual appearance or virtual, like in the office through a virtual private network. And then you access the data and application. But when it comes to, let's say, cloud, you could get data could be in OneDrive, or it could be Dropbox and anywhere. The data is in the cloud, and this is where the challenge is, and this is where the traditional firewall model does not work. So your data is everywhere, right? As you can see in this example, as I said before, data can be anywhere. It can be at Box, it can be Google Drive, in Microsoft 365, Box. I mean, you can imagine your company's data can be in any of these places. So how do you make sure you have the controls where you wanted to protect your data? This is the biggest problem. So as a professional engineer, as a security engineer, as a cloud security engineer, to be specifically, this is where you need to know about these products and the control available. So if your company is Microsoft shop, then you basically need to know how these things work. If you're AWS, then of course you have to understand. But any organization which is using Microsoft 365, I think it's a good start to understand how these things work. And as I said, we'll see what this product is capable of. Does it really, and how far does it support non-Microsoft? Before getting into the details, it's kind of a framework like Microsoft Information Protection. So before you wanted to look into those and can be either operation side or administrative side for implementing the control, or could be a consultant, you could be an architect, engineer. I mean, there are like a very broader scope, and which one of them is include discovery and classification of the data, because without knowing the data, how you want to know, how would you even know what data is there, right? So if there are like 10,000 Excel sheets, you don't know what these Excel sheets are just the data, or 50% of Excel sheet has personal identification information or any health information, maybe a security card, maybe a bank account number, routing number. These things needs to be properly classified, and you have to do the discovery. This is where the phase one is important. Like you have to discover and classify the information. And usually it's not you doing it. You have to work with different departments, application or the business owner. You may have to work with like legal and compliance department. So this kind of conversation happens somewhere. Project start from the leadership and comes to the engineering head or all these people, and then you knowing the product. So basically, you also have to understand the framework, and then it comes to the control where you go and apply the policies. So as you look across the board, you have to first, find out what type of data is there. You perform the discovery. You understand what data is in your organization. Then you have to apply different protection policies. For example, you can have a different protection policies for email versus a particular Excel sheet, for example. And this is where it comes to more of a action-based, how you want to do that. Do you just want to keep monitoring, or you want to remediate, you want to take some action? If somebody drag and drop a file which has full of personal identification and health information and the social security number, what are you going to do, right? So in that case, you have to develop your company's strategy. Of course, in that case, you don't want to allow that data to be copied outside your tenant, for example, or a particular computer, for example. This is where you need to apply some remediation steps that, hey, block this policy. So in traditional data center environment, solutions are there, but when it goes to the cloud and in hybrid, so if you do not have component which supports the cloud, this is going to be failed. So there are like so many scenarios in complex, but this is the area, this is where our gaps are. So if you're 100% in the cloud, then again, you have to pay attention to this. You just don't want to move the cloud. And if you moved it, then you got to make sure you know what type of data you have in the cloud. And then it will help you the overall process. Once you have best security policy and procedure, it will also help your organization to become compliant with which industry you based in. If you're health, you have to be HIPAA compliant. If you're like sometime other environment, you need to be SOC 2 type 2 compliant. Some of them you may have to ISO 27000. So it depends what their needs come from. Mobile devices, on the apps itself, a different cloud environment and hybrid. So there are a lot of challenges, but again, in a nutshell, this is where how it looks like. So how do you get started? As I said before, you have to discover what kind of personal data do you have and where does it reside. It could be health information related data also. It could be financial data. So once you find out by doing the discovery from different folks, database team, application team, whichever. So it's a lot. It could be a long process also, depending on the size of the organization. It can take anywhere from 3 months to 6 months or even a year, depending. Then once you have to do the classification, then you have to tag the data. And this is where and how it works. Once you have a tagging done, this is where you apply the policy, and this is how you can monitor and protect the data. Again, you have to detect or discover, classify, protect, and monitor the data. And then you can detect sensitive information. Here in the diagram, we're seeing Microsoft Client Access Security, which is part of as 365. And there are some agent-based and agentless, a control available for on-premises, and everything in the cloud you can monitor, like Box, Salesforce, and other infrastructure as well. So this is in a nutshell. We can see here that Microsoft Information Protection, right? You have Azure Information Protection, which is the control, which is the product itself. So MIPS, which is MIPS, Microsoft Information Protection, is a framework. And these are the technologies and control of the products, you can say, whichever you name it, you can achieve and protect the data for your organization. Not going to go into the details, but again, Azure Information Protection is one of those products. Then you have Office 365 DLP, you have Office apps, you have independent solution or service provider. They can develop some things like here, you have Microsoft Office 365 Advanced Data Governance. You can also protect the data in, as I said before, Microsoft SharePoint and groups, where it could be Word file, a PowerPoint, Excel sheets, anything within those document libraries. So you will have to basically apply tagging, and from there you can apply policy. You don't have to write any API or nothing. It's there. So there are so many built-in SaaS providers and all these things available. You can just literally go and apply those policies. Same thing, you have Microsoft Advanced Security Management for 365, Windows ATP. It also works for Microsoft Azure also. So this is a good tool. So this is how you can achieve. Message encryption is all about, it allows you to force end-to-end encrypted messages inside and outside. This is very important. It can also help you for your accounting and financial people, and also the HR, where you want them or where you want to share some data with them and you want to make sure it's end-to-end encrypted. It's available. And for Office 365, remember, it's available for free. Maybe E3 license, something you can double check in one of my videos. So this is there. It's one of the greatest tool, and it does not take enough time. Conditional access is another amazing tool where you can apply the policies based on the condition. If one condition happens, then apply this policy. Again, here we have something on premises. Then how do you do that? But again, I'm going to make a pause here or end this particular video. If you like it, if you wanted to know more, let me know. Maybe in the future, I can add and share more details. So that being said, thank you so much. I'll see you in the next video.